Hey, it's Scott from FamilyWheels.ca with another car review for your growing family, and this is the 2019 Lincoln Nautilus. So if you're looking for a new SUV that's luxurious, a bit sporty, and stinking good looking, we may have found it for you. I mean, look at this thing. It's beautiful, right? But before you jump out of your seat and run down to the nearest dealership, you should know that you need to be prepared to be peppered with questions about your new SUV everywhere you go. Specifically, how much you paid for it. And I don't know what it is about driving a car like this that just makes people feel like they can ask you a question like that, but they will. And not to worry, because when they do, you can just direct them to this video where we will answer that question and all of the others that pertain to whether or not this is the right vehicle for you and your growing family. Let's go check it out. So the Nautilus is actually the second vehicle in Lincoln's SUV crossover lineup. It sits between the smaller MKC and the larger MKT, and up until recently it was actually called the MKX. And if you're thinking to yourself that it looks a bit like a Ford Edge, well, that would be because the Nautilus is the Lincoln counterpart to the Edge, and the two share a lot of pieces, with Lincoln, of course, being the higher end of the two, as Lincoln is manufactured by Ford. The Edge is generally considered to be a great vehicle, and I know a few people who own one and love them, so it stands to reason that a luxury version would only improve upon an already winning formula. The Nautilus is available in two different trims. There's the Select and the higher end Reserve. Both come with all-wheel drive, and there are two different engine options you can choose from. A 2-liter turbocharged 4-cylinder or a 2.7-liter twin-turbo V6, which we have here in our test model. The 4-cylinder delivers 250 horsepower and 280 pound-feet of torque, while the V6 gives you 335 horse and 380 pound-feet of torque. Both engines pair with an 8-speed automatic, though I will say I'm not a huge fan of how the gears are selected with these push buttons next to the infotainment system. It just feels out of place for me. From here though, it's options galore, including things you'd expect, like a huge panoramic moonroof, 21-inch rims that look awesome, enhanced park assist, adaptive cruise control and lane centering, rear seat entertainment system, etc., etc. The base model Nautilus comes pretty well equipped on its own too, with ambient lighting, keyless entry, remote start, Apple CarPlay and Android Auto, and a rear view camera that has a wash feature. I can't tell you the number of times I've gone to use a rear view camera only to find that it's filthy from bad weather and dirty roads, rendering it useless. Great idea here. Onto the interior, it's luxury from start to finish in here. All of the colors and trim options you can get all feel really high-end, very classy. I think it's a beautiful car outside and in, and you really feel like you're in a high-end unit here. With so many options available from every car maker these days, I sometimes wonder how the luxury brands will distinguish themselves, but in Lincoln's case, I don't think it'll be a problem. The fit and finish are clearly a cut above. It just feels high-end, and the seats are insane, like really. 22-way adjustable. They can do basically anything. The headrest adjusts, and they also have a thigh extension for people with long legs who need to move their seats back. And that's not even the best part. Both front seats here in our test model have massage functions built in, and before you ask, yes, they work while the car is driving. Now, let's be honest, this is kind of a vanity thing, right? Like, who really needs to get a massage while they're driving? And of course, a massage chair isn't really a substitute for the real thing, but after using it a few times, it is kind of a cool perk, and if nothing else, it would serve as a fun way to entertain the kids or friends you may have riding with you. The little details and trims throughout are all really nice too. Everything has this elite feel to it. It's all very first class and high end. Lots of storage throughout the cockpit here. We have a nice closable storage bin here below the infotainment screen. It has a USB port in it, 2 cup holders, and then more storage under the armrest with another USB port as well. There are also these 2 storage bunks below the console, which is a really nice feature. I could totally see this space used for things you would want to keep in the car, but wouldn't necessarily need every day. The space is well thought out and easily accessible, but hidden away enough that it's not in your way at all. Moving on to the rear seats, decent enough legroom here, no problem for 4 adults on long trips. The rear seats are heated and there is also USB support back here as well. There's a fold down armrest in the rear seats, but I'm not wild about the cup holders here. This pop out holder feels flimsy and like it could be a recipe for disaster with young kids trying to use it. The rear seats don't slide like in other comparable models, but they do recline pretty far, which is nice, but also presents a problem when we get to the space behind the seats. Lots of space back here, which is great, and I'll say that I do like this sliding privacy cover. Unlike other models we've tested, it has these tracks for the cover to slide in, which means you never have to fuss with it. It's easy and accurate every time you use it. But the problem I was mentioning is because of the reclining rear seats, there needs to be this gap between the seat and the cover. If you had something valuable back here, there's a chance that someone could still see it if the rear seats weren't reclined. You'd have to take measures to make sure the seats were set back, or you'd have to have your stuff covered underneath the tonneau cover, which kind of defeats the purpose. The infotainment system is great. It's the same as you would get in a Ford. It's Sync, and this is the Sync 3. I've used it before and I really like it. The screen is well sized, it's bright and easy to read and equally easy to navigate. Bluetooth syncing was no problem and it stayed consistent throughout our test period. Well laid out tactile buttons to accompany the touch screen. I prefer dials for temperature and fan settings, but these buttons are fine instead, not a deal breaker at all. Everything worked well once I got used to it, par for the course here. Steering wheel controls were great. I like the buttons for volume control and media selection. You're not likely to find yourself hitting the wrong thing here, and the dash is great too. It's customizable with what you want it to show, and it's also really easy to read and navigate. Overall, I'd say that the Sync 3 system is one of the better infotainment systems we've tested. Let's move on to our standardized testing, where the Nautilus fared fairly well. In our rear-facing car seat test, we measured 30.5 inches from the rear of the front passenger seat to the glove box. It's pretty great for an SUV of this size, and installing the car seat is no problem either. The latches were easy to locate thanks to little tabs on the seats to tell you where to find them. I'll admit that I'm loving the little doors for direct access that we're starting to see in more and more models, but these are better than nothing. Standardized trunk test, no problem. Tons of room for everything here, obviously, and you can keep it all covered by that sliding gear cover. But again, keep in mind that aforementioned gap up near the seats should you really want to make your stuff hidden. Decibel test, the Nautilus was very quiet, measuring in at 60.5 decibels at 100 kilometers an hour on dry roads. And in our look back test, I'm going to pass this thing with distinction. Look at it, really nails this high-class SUV look. I love the big rims. Our test model here has the 21s, and the color is beautiful. I loved looking back at it every time I parked and walked away. So what about from behind the wheel? How does the Nautilus actually drive? Well, it's actually a bit of a Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde situation. I found the Nautilus a bit reserved at first, but then I delved into the sport mode, and man, what a difference it makes. Interesting to note here that in the vehicle settings, you can actually select what you want the sport mode to affect. The vehicle's handling, performance, or both. It's kind of nice in that you can set it to increase the performance but leave the ride comfortable for your passengers. When both modes are engaged, the Nautilus takes on a whole new personality and feels like a full-on sports wagon as opposed to a laid-back luxury hauler. Now remember, our test model here does have that twin-turbo 335 horsepower engine, so it makes sense that it would be on the fun end of the spectrum, but regardless, I think it's a great vehicle to drive. Comfy and relaxed when you need it, and lots of get up and go when you want it. So all in all, I think the Nautilus would make an excellent choice for a family that wants a high-class, high-end luxury vehicle. It has tons of utility throughout and lots of extra great little details that just make the experience that much better. If you plan on spending a lot of time in your vehicle, it's nice to drive something that makes you feel good every time you get into it, and this certainly fits the bill. It's very first class, like everything feels elite, but it also has all of the things that you need for a growing family. I'd certainly drive this thing every day. For FamilyWheels.ca, I'm Scott.